And hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Another Fine Mess. I'm Roger Gray, along with Mike Vance.
Yes,
How are you, sir?
I am doing fine, and welcome to episode 2.
Indeed. And so much has happened this week. And I'm sure, Mike, you're going to want to talk about the release of all the UFO files, right?
Ha! You mean the pictures of random dots? Yeah.
Pretty much.
They
Yeah,
have gotten so hard up on trying to distract, and people around the country are going, Epstein files, Epstein files.
Well,
and I'm
th-
a
this
little
is-
bit more dribbled out, I'll say that, but the misdirection, because we'll jump right in here, and I've said this repeatedly, first term, this term, two things. He cares about two things and only two things: having his ego stroked and pocketing money.
Oh, of course.
That's it. The end. So the
families,
corruption.
yeah, the family's made about $2.5 billion at least since he got back into office. Yeah, this is a distraction from the high gas prices due to the war, which was a distraction from Epstein. It was also a distraction for Netanyahu, by the way. He is facing corruption charges, and he's managed to put off the trial, sort of like Ken Paxton put off his ultimate trial by going to war with everybody. And not that Hezbollah didn't deserve it, and not that Hamas didn't deserve it, but come on. This is we're jangling car keys in front of a toddler.
Yeah. Well, Ken Paxton would have sued Hezbollah if he'd thought of it.
Yes, that's true. But I know what you'd really like to talk about are the events at the Supreme Court. Let's start with that, which we tend to have forgotten because, like drinking from a fire hose, it's something new every day. The reflecting pool and you name it. I have some ballroom news, and we're going to talk about the war. But first, let's talk about the Supreme Court and Louisiana versus Calais. And I know you had a real interest in this. Well, we all should.
We all should, but I do as a historian because I've done a lot of work about the history of black voting rights. And this started, the 15th Amendment passed 1870-ish. Little known fact, several of the southern states had already passed state laws that blacks were allowed to vote a couple of years prior to that 15th Amendment. But nonetheless, let's say 1867 to 1870. Immediately, those white ex-Confederates started trying to disenfranchise blacks. Keep in mind, these are the same people that didn't want the freed, emancipated blacks to get schooling either. There are murderous attacks on schools and schools being burned down. They're doing the same thing with voting. And to their undying credit, the Union carpetbaggers that the South liked to call them that came in, organized black voting groups. There was a group throughout most of the South, but especially strong in Texas, called the Union League. And they organized between white Northerners, white Unionists that were in the South, and all of these freedmen that were now allowed to vote. And it was only men, of course. They organized these support groups, if you will, to educate candidates, have them voting. Meanwhile, the ex-Confederates, for a good 10, 15 years after this, are in some cases murdering people. In a lot of cases, flat stealing the ballot boxes that were physical ballot boxes from a polling place that would then be ridden by horseback into the county seat. They're literally stealing those. In some cases, I've run across and studied in detail that they just wouldn't open certain polling places that had a black majority. It's the same thing that's happening now. But after that happened, because, yes, there was one black senator elected from Mississippi. There were black congressmen from all the southern states. But if you think about the local races, there were sheriffs and tax collectors and county treasurers that were in most of the counties in the South, the ones that had been black majority prior to emancipation. So the whites are in some cases running these people out of town, in some cases killing them. And when that didn't seem to satisfy them, they started coming up with things like poll taxes and literacy tests. The term grandfather clause,
Property ownership, yeah.
yes, grandfather clause, well, property ownership goes back to the Constitution. You had to be a property owner to vote, from the very start. But the grandfather clause, which is something that you hear all the time, along with sanity clause, if you're Chico Marx. But
Yes.
the grandfather clause
And
literally
no
says,
Saturday clause.
it says that if you don't pass the literacy, don't need to take the literacy test if your grandfather had voted. So in other words, if your grandfather, your white grandfather was allowed to vote, then you're okay. But hey, your grandfather couldn't vote because he was enslaved, so no,
Right.
you have to pass this literacy test. You know where the grandfather clause started? Louisiana.
Okay.
The biggest,
Which, by the way,
big,
we should
yes,
remind folks is 1/3 African American, 1/3 black.
yeah. Only Mississippi has a higher black population than Louisiana. So this has been an ongoing thing. The whites have been trying to disenfranchise black voters ever since black voters got the right. There's a story Dan Rather, I don't know if you read his Substack, Steady.
Occasionally.
He sent one out talking about when he met Medgar Evers in 1962 and went with him to the polls and walked in. Here's a reporter walking in with Evers, and the white poll worker is like, boy, where you think you're going? You're not going to vote here today. And not only unapologetic, not concerned that a reporter is in there watching him. So that's 62. 3 years later, the Voting Rights Act passed for a good reason. So temporarily, that's the end of my soapbox.
Okay. It was signed into law in '66. We, I have mentioned before that I looked at the Senate's vote on the Voting Rights Act, and as you might expect, the South is solid red against. Some states, the senators split their vote. Texas was one of those states. Obviously, 2 senators. Ralph Yarborough was a Democrat. John Tower was the Republican, and he was elected when Lyndon became vice president, took Lyndon's old seat. Tower voted against both the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, by the way. So, as I've said, Martin Luther King may have been right that the arc of history bends toward justice, but Towers was at the other end pushing back. But it passed pretty handily and has been the law of the land. But now it has been piece by piece, and I have to say the Roberts has. I had a certain amount of hope for John Roberts, that he was one of those sensible guys, but he has
For him
joined
personally.
in this. Huh? Pardon?
For him personally.
Yeah. Him personally, but the court, no, Alito, some of the others. They're slowly taking this law apart, and that is going to have a huge impact on black turnout. It just is.
Well, not so slowly. They're taking it apart pretty quickly, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But you look at all these municipalities and states that are closing black and Hispanic polling places or moving them at the last minute so people don't know
Yeah.
where to vote. They show up at a locked building.
Or like
Changing the voting
Houston, if I could just interrupt, like Houston, making the number smaller of polling places.
Yes.
Reducing the number of polling places. Thank you, Raj, and putting them, as you say, very far away from where you live. So voting now becomes a bit of a trip.
And that is not coming necessarily from the locality or the municipality or the county. That is coming from the state of Texas because they're constantly at war with the Democratic cities, which all of them are, the big cities in Texas. Tennessee, just a couple of days ago, passed new voting districts, and gerrymandering is the other half of this problem. But
Right.
they passed new voting districts that divided like a corner of Sunburst, Memphis, into these rays going out into the red rural parts of Tennessee. So it doesn't give Memphis and Memphians, I know that word,
I
it
didn't know
doesn't give
that.
them, yes, Memphians. Which, did you ever see the Taxi episode where they were trying to figure out the difference between if it was Delawareites or Delawareans?
Yeah.
Was anyway,
I didn't see that.
great episode. So the Memphians, who have something in common with one another, now are split up into three little radial districts that shoot out into rural Tennessee with people that they have nothing in common with. So they will lose their representation in Congress. And the Supreme Court, why on earth they allow gerrymandering, why you can't go in and say, hey, you are taking away my voting rights, my right to representation. That seems fairly straightforward to me.
Well, and I can go deeper than that, and maybe we should discuss this sometime. If you look at the Federalist Papers, are considered virtually sacred, right next to the Constitution and the Declaration, by a lot of folks, particularly conservatives. If you look at Federalist 22, I just really found out about this. It was Alexander Hamilton. Whether you like the play or not, he pointed out the basic problem with the way the Senate is set up. Because you have a number of states with minimal population. For example, Wyoming has a little over 500,000 people. It is the least populous state in the Union. Montana has right at 1 million. So there you have 1.5 million Americans, voting Americans, represented by 4 senators. You could add Texas with 32 million. You could add California with 39, and you're still talking about 4 senators. He thought that was basically goofy.
Well, it
That
is.
that the majority of people could be live under laws that were basically decided by people representing of a minority of Americans.
And
I
we
found
are.
that a very logical argument.
Well, we do, but the reason that came about was because the slaveholding rural South wanted
Right.
equal representation. So, like the Electoral College, the design of the Senate was to protect slaveholding planters. That's how both of them came to be.
So if you're a fan of Hamilton, read Federalist 22. It
I
makes
like
so
the
much
I like the
sense.
play a lot better than the person. I think he's an overrated windbag, actually, as a historical figure. Play, I
But in
got
this
no problem
particular
with.
case, I think he was right.
Yeah, no, I think he
Yeah.
was right several times, but he also, I mean, the fact, if you want to talk about slavery, he held slaves, and yet he's put forward as this guy. He not only held them, he dealt his father-in-law's slaves, helped him, the father-in-law, buy and sell them.
Well, and he
So,
was mixed race, which is terribly ironic. So, yeah.
yeah, I'm more of a James Madison fan than I am a Hamilton fan.
Well, I can understand that. Um, let's move on. Let's talk about the war.
Yep.
The war, that thing that's going on in the Middle East. We're looking at incredible economic downside of this. The general figures just came out yesterday, as a matter of fact. Actually, jobs have held reasonably well. Not great. It ain't a great report, but it's better than they expected. And GDP is okay, but the stock market is being driven by AI, pure and simple. There are just a handful of stocks that are driving the entire market. So when that is bragged about, you know, the Dow hit 50. Okay, yeah, it did, and it's largely driven by Meta and Anthropic and all of these guys. You look at the war. we've either won it, or we're going to win it, or it's over, or it's not over, or we're waiting on a treaty, or we're. And now we have a report from Jonathan Lemire that his sources in the administration say Trump is just bored. He's bored with this whole thing. He just wants wrap it up, get some kind of agreement, and we'll move on to Cuba.
First of all,
probably.
I mean,
Yeah.
the guy, we all know that he is a child, a bullying child. That is all he is. It's all he ever has been. If you go back and study him at age 20, it was all he was. But so, yes, I'm sure he is bored. He gets bored easily. Talk about waving the keys in front of the toddler. That's
Right.
what his handlers have to do constantly.
Well,
But
exactly. Well,
in,
his morning briefing has to be a video
yes,
because look. There's nothing he likes on TV except Fox and Friends, frankly, and they have to put together these videos of stuff blowing up, and that is his morning briefing, the same morning briefing from intelligence services that every reasonable president has gotten from both parties.
yeah,
It
and
has
other
to be
presidents.
it has to be a show.
Yes, other presidents read multiple newspapers. What I was going to say, though, before we went off on yet another tangent, but
Sorry.
well, no, not at all. And I was just going to say to anybody watching or listening, expect that, because that's kind of what we do. There, within the same 20-minute span, you have we're working on a peace treaty. We are holding the ceasefire. We just blew up 3 ships. So, you know, ceasefire used to actually
Hello.
mean we're not going to fire at each other until
Right.
this guy and Netanyahu got involved. And yeah, we have a ceasefire, but I didn't like the way they looked at him. So we're going to blow up that building. We're going to attack that base. But no, we still have a ceasefire. Well, no, you don't.
Well, and that's we're seeing that illogic filter through the press conferences of everybody. Hegseth had one the other day, and a U.S. ship had been fired upon. It had fired back at the Iranians from on shore, one presumes, and a reporter from ABC, if I recollect correctly, said, "What does that mean? The ceasefire is over?" No, excuse me, it wasn't Hegseth. It was Rubio. And Rubio said, "No, we have to fire back. When your ship is fired upon, you have to fire back." That wasn't the question. The question was, does that mean the ceasefire is over? And he used the same illogic. Well, no, the ceasefire is over, and I don't know why you think our military shouldn't defend itself. Nobody thinks that. That was not the question. In other words, here we go. We're not answering the question, and when we do answer, it makes no sense.
You know, out in the general population, and you know how I feel. You know how much I despise the both sides do it argument because they are not equal, and we can spend a whole show on that one day.
And we
But
probably will. Yeah.
yes, when it comes to memes driving the conversation, though, social media memes, both sides are equally guilty of stupidity.
Yeah.
The difference in this administration is that memes seem to be what is driving the people actually in charge. The stuff that you can fit in 2 sentences with a pretty color behind the white writing, that seems to be the end of their thought process in a lot of cases.
If the Pope doesn't like the idea of a war of choice, when negotiations might have substituted for what we're doing, he obviously wants Iran to have a nuclear weapon. That is the A plus B equals L in this logic. I mean, even the Pope is having to deal with this, for crying out loud. All he said is, "Hey, stop fighting. War's not a good idea."
Yep.
Yeah. Anyway. Plus, when Marco arrived, he gave him like an airport gift shop gift. It was a crystal football.
Yeah, I mean, come
'Cause
on,
he's
we've
from
all done that.
Chicago.
We've
I
all
know.
done that. You forgot, you need to bring something home. It's like, hey,
Oh yeah,
good to be here at the
I
peace negotiations. Here's a snow globe.
I
So,
I have attached to my refrigerator a magnetized bottle opener from Mount Vernon that you gave me. That I know you're leaving Mount Vernon. Oh, I'm going to run into Raj. We're going to do the show when I get back. I'll stop at the gift shop and get him something. Yeah.
but yet that's been quite a few years, and yet you still have that.
I still
So
have. Yes,
I
I
would say
do.
that's a pretty thoughtful gift. I used to, there was a mantra.
Karen keeps putting it in. Karen keeps putting it in the drawer with like the wine opener and everything else. But I keep putting it back on the fridge because, honey, it has a magnet. It
I,
belongs on the fridge.
I
Yeah.
appreciate that. I used to tell, this was one of my mantras back when I used to hang out at the ice house drinking beer until late at night, that if your wife is expecting you home and you're running late, stop at the convenience store and just bring her something random. I don't care if it's a bag of nuts, and just show up and go, honey, I thought about you, so I stopped and got you something.
Well, your buddy Rich Scheidner, it was one of my favorites. He said you're out with the guys shooting pool, and oh my gosh, I was supposed to be home an hour ago. Somebody break my leg, so I have excuse when I walk in. He by the way, and I another digression. Forgive me, but one of the lines of his that I always loved is when you do get home, and she has that look, and uh, uh, you say, "What's wrong?" And she says, "You know what's wrong." He said, "Don't volunteer anything because if you go through your mental Rolodex, it can be any of a number of things. And if you guess wrong, now she has two of them." So
Scheidner is
anyway,
absolute
Scheidner,
hysterical.
I like the.
Yeah, Scheidner still doing well. He's living in North Carolina, and I talk to him every once in a while. I'll do a cheap plug. I got a new book out that he's involved in. 40 comics. We did Comedians Talking Baseball. It's a really funny book. But yeah,
And
Scheidner.
you said a college friend of mine is one of your big contributors to that.
Yes, Robert Wall
Yeah.
is on the cover, a picture of him and Derek Jeter. So, yeah.
Which in his act he said wall is Russian for side of a building. So there you go.
So
Anyway,
both very funny guys. Oh, anyway. So
anyway,
back to news stuff. Although expect to hear on this podcast, expect to hear some entertainment rambling and sports and whatever else we feel like doing.
sort of like you just heard a little bit of. Yeah.
Yeah, if you don't like it, start your own podcast. Everybody else in the world has it.
Yeah. Hey, did you hear that the Secretary of Transportation spent the last 7 months filming a special for Fox?
No, no, I have not.
Sean Duffy and his family spent 7 months on a family trip for a special called the Great American Road Trip. That's going to air on Fox while he's Secretary of Transportation, while airplanes are almost crashing into each other or actually crashing into each other.
Or
He's
at
on
least
the road with his family
at
filming for
least
Fox.
hitting a traffic sign while they land. Something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah. Is he getting paid for that?
I don't know. That's an interesting question because I'm not aware of the arrangement. But yeah, he went on Fox and Friends and said, "Yeah, it was great. Everybody should travel." Well, yes, everybody should. You're the transportation secretary. It's your job to kind of encourage that. But oh, for crying out loud, and you can go. We can go into Cash Patel and so on and so forth. But it's a clown car.
Well, at least Duffy is one of the ones that has not been accused of drinking heavily on the job yet,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is good if he's driving a Winnebago around the country.
I would think so. I would think so. But anyway, just to wrap up our conversation about the war, we're getting. I don't know what it's like. You are in rural Texas, and I don't know what gas is like there. We just hit like 419 here in East Texas, and I know it's way worse in other parts of the country.
Yeah, yeah. The last time I filled up, because I really, to be honest, I haven't gone anywhere in the last
Yeah.
several days. But the last time that I filled up, I think I paid $3.96.
Yeah.
I'm expecting that it is over, well over $4 now around here too.
Particularly, yeah, in a rural part of the state. And yeah, you're right. I mean, we have avoided Sunday is Mother's Day, and in the little town where we are now, restaurant choices are pretty slim. It's Mexican and burgers. So I want to take her to the next town over, which is Nacogdoches, about a 30-minute drive, and I'm thinking, that's going to cost, yeah, just add that to the dinner. I mean, it's Mother's Day, so.
Well, it will. But I will remind you, Roger, people in
Yeah.
Mexico eat Mexican food every day.
I know.
So
And I
there's,
love Mexican. I love Mexican food. You just want something a little more fancy, I guess, is all I'm saying. Fancy Mexican food would be fine. Yeah.
well, ask for a little side bowl of sliced jalapenos or something like that, and there you go.
There you go.
And Bob's your uncle. So I never did understand that saying, by the way. It's a British
I
thing. But
I know. Well, they have a dessert called spotted dick. So I mean, how can you actually take anything seriously
yeah,
from
I'll
over
stick
there?
with Bob's your uncle.
Yeah. But
So
yeah, it looks like we're going to get some sort of agreement that my guess is going to resemble the agreement that President Obama hammered out over the course of what, a year and a half it took, and with all the agreement of our allies in Europe, and that was torn up the minute Trump came into office. He's going to get the
yes,
same thing he tore up, what, 8 years ago.
I don't think we will get the same thing.
Yeah.
And I could be wrong, and I
Yeah.
hope I'm wrong. But based on what I've been reading, and I'm sure you're reading the same stuff,
Sure.
Iran does not want to give up the concessions to on nuclear material that they did last time, and they don't want to give up control of the strait.
Well, and that's because they've seen what that gets them. Nothing.
Yes,
So they're going to want nukes even more.
yeah, and eliminating the heads that we did, the people that have coalesced to take the leadership in Iran right now, are more conservative, more reactionary than the people that we killed off. So we have created a worse situation than we had before he started all this bullshit.
And by the way, there's a CIA report that was just revealed. I love the fact, small digression, I love the headline. Susie Wiles, chief of staff for the president, sent out an email to everybody on the staff to stop leaking stuff to the press. That email was immediately leaked to the press. So, I mean, it's a bottomless sieve. If that isn't too much of a
Well,
contradiction in terms.
this will be my second. Yes, both sides do the leaking, but if they didn't, honestly, the public would rarely know things. So there,
Oh yeah.
I take that actually as a good sign that there's somebody in there with a little shred of conscience and dignity left. That
Well, the CIA report the CIA report that was leaked showed that Iran has way more missiles left than we've been telling people. They have become masters of producing drones, second only to Ukraine, by the way. Which now that, and I'm really digressing here, but as we've discussed, drones have changed everything about warfare. They're cheap, they're effective. Ukraine has ones that will go all the way to Moscow, which is why there's a ceasefire there, because this weekend is their big, VE Day parade in Moscow. And Iran has lots of those, lots of missiles. We haven't wiped it all out, as has been claimed, which is why Trump is talking about, let's get a deal and get out of there and get your gas prices back down.
Yeah, 70% of the missiles untouched is what that CIA report said. whereas the White House is saying, "Oh, there's only about 18% left," which is a
Oh yeah, they
bald-faced
got
lie.
we wiped them out.
Absolute
We
lie.
won. Yeah. So
So,
anyhow, so this thing he'll probably take a deal, some deal, something, and then we can talk about Cuba, which I really don't understand because this isn't 1962.
no,
There aren't
people are,
Russian missiles in Cuba.
well,
Go ahead.
first of all, they want it to be 1962 because that would put it back before the Voting Rights and Civil Rights Act.
Oh well, yeah.
So, I mean,
They want it to be 1952, I guess. Really.
that's what they're longing for. But I had a baseball trip. I've mentioned this before. I had a baseball trip to Cuba booked. We couldn't go. At the last minute, they had to cancel it because there was an outbreak of dengue fever. And there were about 20 something people going on the trip. And the guide goes, "Okay, so how many people is this going to knock out?" My buddy and I were the only ones that went, "Yeah, we'll still go." So everybody else bailed. So I did not get to go to Cuba to see baseball, which was the plan.
Yeah.
But the reason that dengue fever had flared up uncontrollably is because they did not have the money because of the blockade of this administration. They didn't have the money or fuel to run the mosquito fogging trucks that we pedaled behind as kids. So, that infrastructure for that entire island has collapsed. They have been for decades one of the poorest nations in the entire Western Hemisphere.
Yeah.
And that has gotten worse. There are people starving. There are power outages last days. They're in horrible shape, and they need humanitarian aid, and they deserve humanitarian aid. And this administration, which time and again is just the most inhumanly cruel group of people that you can possibly imagine, their answer is, let's starve them out.
Oh, yeah.
Let's double down on that.
Forget, and as you say, the fogging trucks, hospitals, for crying out loud,
Yeah.
garbage
The
collection, it is piling up
that's
everywhere. Go ahead.
garbage collection, yes, and back to the mosquitoes. But the Cuban medical system is something that they have always prided themselves on as better than ours, but not lately because they don't have electricity.
I guess what I don't get is we're past. It is a post-Cold War era, of course it is, and we're past that whole domino theory. And anywhere the Russians are, we have to take them on because it's going to spread. It was like cancer, and Cuba was part of that because Cuba's 90 miles off the coast of America, but they're not anymore. Nobody's really scared of Putin, well, except Trump, and and nobody's worried about Cuba. Let's be honest. So, if that's the government they choose, I think it's a bad choice. But if that's the government they choose, so be it. We deal with China. Trump went to visit North Korea, for goodness sakes, and we want to starve out Cuba because they're communist.
Vietnam's an ally.
Like I said, it's a bad system, but it's theirs. It's their
Yeah.
call.
Yeah, Vietnam is an ally, and they are still
Yeah.
the
Good
communists
point.
that beat us.
Yeah.
So I know that you wanted to talk about the ballroom, which we talked about in episode 1, but you had a new bit of information.
Yeah, this I found interesting because I was not aware of this, and it's been around for a while. First of all, Mr. President, this thing started out at 200 billion. It went up to 3, now up to 4, and now and it was all going to be privately financed until apparently the contracts were revealed. I think in the Washington Post. I think, and it grants all of the Zuckerbergs and Bezoses of the world complete anonymity for their bribes and that's what this is. Private financing is just a chance for a bunch of billionaires to basically make nice to the administration. hoping to get something out of
and
that.
stop investigations that were going on into their mega corporations. But yes,
Of course, of course.
it's bribery. It's
But
bribery
and now,
and
go
extortion.
ahead.
So bribery and
Well,
extortion.
yeah,
Let's have both words in there. But
of
anyway,
course.
back to the ballroom.
Nice little corporation you got there. Be a shame if something happened to it. So all of the contributions were supposedly pouring in. Now the Congress has included $1 billion of taxpayer money. I didn't think this thing was going to cost $1 billion, and I didn't think we were going to pay for it. But apparently, now that's what Republicans in Congress are talking about. And here's the irony: we don't need it. I mean, having a big event space for state dinners and all of that, yeah, that would be a nice thing. But we don't need it. We already have one. It's called the Andrew Mellon Auditorium. I think is the actual title, named for the former Treasury Secretary and Gilded Age grifter, the Mellon family, the Mellon banking family. Anyway, it was completed in 1935. It is 1 mile, 1.1 miles from the White House. So I know Trump would like to have one en suite, but in this particular, you can just open a door and walk into the ballroom. But that involves lots of security and so forth. The Mellon Auditorium is, frankly, more tastefully elegant than what Trump has in mind. Although, if he decides to go with this, Home Depot's open late. They have lots of gold gilt you can add to it. And the Mellon Ballroom, it is literally 15 minutes walking distance from the White House, depending on how swollen your ankles are at that moment. And it's there. We paid for it. And because it isn't attached to the White House, it's rented out. Weddings. The NATO treaty was signed there. The NAFTA treaty was signed there. Big government celebrations are held there. Part of the 2020 Republican convention was held there that nominated Trump, for goodness sakes. He has spoken there, so he knows it's there. And it's bigger. It'll hold slightly more people than he's planning for his big ballroom. So my essential question is, whether it's donations or government money, why are we even doing this?
Well, because he can't make any money off of that, and it's about
Well,
him personally. Um,
and he
but
can't
as
put his
you
name
pointed
on
out,
it because Mellon's name is already on it. Yeah.
well, but
What?
he should take
Kennedy's
solace
name
in
was
the
on the
fact.
Kennedy Center. Yeah.
Yeah, Mellon was also a con man and a hated
Oh yeah.
politician, so it should fit right in. He should feel right at home.
Kind of the father of trickle down. Yeah.
Yeah, so why not? So I wanted
Okay.
to introduce a new feature, and since we're only on episode 2, it's I'm getting in on the ground floor here. Let's face it.
Okay.
The weird history fact of the episode, or weird
All right.
history fact of the day or the week. Take your pick. I wanted to talk about teeth. So dentures specifically.
Yep.
George Washington is America's most famous denture wearer, and people. The wives' tale is wooden teeth, and that's not the case.
No.
Not at all. We know about, he had 7 or 8 different sets of dentures. Spent more on dentures than he did on medical care for the entire household. That's for real, because all of
If
his
only he
account
bought a
books are there.
toothbrush. Yeah.
And everything at Mount Vernon is intact except for the magnetized bottle opener that I stole and brought to you. But nonetheless, Washington, at least one pair of his dentures had real human teeth in it, which was the fashion of the 18th century, started probably back in the late 17th century, continued almost into the 19th century, that people would discard when you went to the dentist and got a tooth pulled because it ached. They would save that and
Yep.
then put it into dentures. There is a theory that that set of Washington's dentures may have had some of his enslaved people's teeth in it. But they later started realizing that porcelain made better looking dentures than using people's bad teeth. Here's the
There's a
part-
reason it was pulled, yeah.
Yes. Here's the part that I did not know until this week. Body scavengers on these big battlefields would go out and, look for coins and stuff and steal clothing. And they would also
Sure.
pull people's teeth. The dead soldiers, they would pull their teeth and sell them to dentists to make dentures. And one of the names was Waterloo Teeth. Not a brand name, mind you, but
Right.
after the Battle of Waterloo and scavenging this. So how's that for a pleasant first weird history fact of the week?
Okay. We're going to try to. I prefer the ballroom story, but I find that fascinating. Michael, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. As always, we're going to wrap this thing up. Thank all of you, and join us next time for another edition of
Another fine mess.